Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Leslie Michelle-Clarke. Before I bring her on, I need to remind you you can always get new regular episodes free on Rokfin, Odysee, and all podcast platforms. Check us out on Rokfin. That's where you get all our premium content, our regular shows, and you can get the premium content from all the awesome creators on Rokfin. We also have a merch store up. It means t-shirts, stickers, bags, all kinds of cool stuff. That link's in the description as well. And finally, if you're reaching that gray hair stage in life, please check out C60 Purple Power, which is the most powerful antioxidant known to man. I've been taking it for over a year, and I feel great. You should really feel great, too. You can even get C60 for your pets. Check out their website, see what they have to offer. Click the link in the description, and you get 10% off your order plus free shipping. Tonight, I want to welcome Leslie Michelle-Clarke. She is a Toronto-based certified clinical hypnotherapist who specializes in a number of modalities, including working with individuals who feel they have had experiences with extraterrestrial beings. She is also a busy arts writer, contributing regularly to a variety of publications. Leslie, welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, Chris, I am so pleased to be here. And I just wanted to say a big hello to all the wonderful people, not only in your hood in Colorado, but certainly throughout your huge fan base. I'm very honored to be here and so pleased to talk about, whatever you want to talk about.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna talk about lots of stuff, and really enjoy talking with guests like yourself because it helps the audience not only get a bigger picture of what people experience during these events, paranormal contacts,
Yes.
abductions, but not only that, but possibly get some kind of understanding of why this is occurring and who these
Hmm.
beings may be. Now, this is your
Yeah.
first time on the show. I'd love to hear about what got you started down your path. What was it that got you going into to working with contactees?
Oh, very interesting. Well, I have always been fascinated with ufology, my entire life, which goes back to when dinosaurs roamed the earth. So before the last ice age, I was actually interested in ufology. So, but I did have a very profound experience of my own when I was about 17 years old. And I was working in summer stock theater in not very far from where you are now, the Black Hills of South Dakota, the Black Hills Playhouse, Rushmore State Park, where the presidential heads are. That's where I was. And I had, and of course, the company members came from all over the United States. And one of my roommates, I can't really give her name because she's, still that might be compromising her. But anyway, I had a wonderful roommate who was a very busy entertainer, singer in particularly the Vegas casinos. She had a whole professional life doing that. But she shared with me that she also worked for the United States government as a kind of a translator or communicator, if you will, with ET beings, and that they would, she'd show up at the Las Vegas airport, and she'd get into one of those unmarked planes, and they'd head her out to, Dulce Base or wherever the action was, and basically she and various other sensitives would sit in rooms and communicate with this a particular shall I say, not breed sounds so awful, but a particular type of gray that was at the time really interacting heavily with the government of the United States. So when she came to work at this summer stock theater, she said the reason she was doing it is she wanted to get away. She wanted to quit and just no longer work for the government. She was exhausted. She couldn't handle it. And and that summer, every time that I, went into the little town of Custer with her or any place, we were followed or monitored by visible craft. So I'm talking about sightings, a couple times a week of very traditional types of cylindrical craft that were lit with different colors. So this went on, and one afternoon, I happened to be outside of our little dorm, and I was doing something else, but I saw a really odd, sort of late model Buick old-fashioned town car. Even then, it was anachronistic. It looked like this would have been this is 1973, so the vehicle looked like 1958 or something. And it drove into the theater complex and pulled up right in front of our dorm. And I knew that my friend was in, but I was not. So I saw two beings get out of this classic Men in Black car, and I have to tell you, Chris, that they really were very strange looking. It's subtle, but the skin itself looked almost like it was plastic. They had a very kind of artificial look to them, and they were wearing the hats, the classic fedoras, like it was ridiculous, almost ridiculous. But the other thing that I remember distinctly is on their feet, they were wearing what looked like weighted, like orthopedic shoes for some reason. These big, heavy, like it looked like they were weighted, and their little pants, the cuffs were up quite high, like high waters. So the whole thing was very was very strange. They couldn't have fit in really anywhere, so except a cinema noir movie in 1956. So I saw them go into my friend's quarters. She had her own entrance, and about a half an hour went by, and I was just about to go in and see if she was okay and like interrupt like whatever was going on when these beings came out and they left. And I went right over and I said, what in God's name, what was that? And she said, well, these are government representatives, and they are trying to convince me to continue to work in the communication program. And I basically told them to F off. Phew. So, and then, then about 2 weeks after that, um, I was sleeping very soundly, and these were very rustic accommodations. It was an old the whole theater complex was an old and you have these in the States, CCC work camps. They were kind of like a federal work program that FDR started during World War II to give men work to pull everybody out of the depression. They were like logging camps, kind of, because that was the kind of work that was being done. So these were rustic accommodations, and it was about 3 in the morning, and I woke up just for no reason, sat up in bed, and pouring in through the outside was a blue light. I mean, just blue, and it felt as if the atmosphere was even thick. The atmosphere felt odd. And I remember that I did hear a very low, not an engine sound, but maybe a low, like a tens, 10 cycle, a very low vibration, if you will, I was aware of. And that's all I remember until the next morning at dawn. I woke up, and I was in terrible pain. I felt like I had to urinate, but I wasn't sure. So I got up, and this was so rustic that we had like a bathhouse where all the accommodations were up a small hill. And I was walking towards the bathhouse, and I noticed that I had a stream of blood coming down my leg. Now, this was not, I'm sure I can be open with your audience and say this was not a normal, like, menstrual situation. This was completely odd and out of, not related to anything that would be normal. And I was in terrible pain. I urinated. I was in terrible pain. Eventually, I did go to a doctor maybe the next day, and he said there was some kind of bacterial infection. And, but um, that was so that experience in itself completely, for me, validated not only the extraterrestrial presence among us and on Earth and involved in our stuff. But the very real thing that may have happened to me, I don't know if some genetic material was harvested. I have never, with any of my colleagues, um, gone back to re-experience that. I may do that at some point, but I have a pretty good idea of what happened. I think I have enough of an idea to maybe not need to go back into it in any great depth.
Right. Now, since then, have you had any other experiences that may have possibly been connected or any other profound experiences?
Boy, I sure wish that I had. I'm of the belief system that there are no isolated experiences, that people who have experiences, whether they're dramatic or minimal, generally when I do regress them, we find out that they have been lifelong experiencers, usually since the age of 3. But in my conscious lifetime, the only other incident that I can recall was not necessarily an extraterrestrial one, but perhaps you can tell me what you think. I was driving from Los Angeles up to Reno, Nevada, and to do that, you must pass really by Mount Shasta. I mean, it's just right there off the Highway 5. And my partner that I was driving with, I warned him. I said, "Look, we're going up high. We're going up to 6,000 feet, whatever it is. Make sure you have enough gas because when your listeners may not know this, but when you're driving in elevated areas, you use gas at a much higher rate." Yeah, so that's a real thing. So I said, "Get the gas." Well, of course, he didn't get the gas. So we're up there right at Mount Shasta in the middle of the night, and it's a full moon. You can like see everything, and we are completely out of gas. So he says, "Okay, I'm just going to go out. I'm going to try to walk somewhere." And this is the middle of the bloody night. So he gets out, and within 30 seconds, a car picks him up and he takes off. And that's it. I mean, I don't know if he's ever coming back. I'm sitting there in the car in the moonlight, Mount Shasta. Now, the next thing that I have conscious memory of is him coming back to the car with a gas can. And I think I had my shirt up. My shirt was on backwards, or there was some kind of weird thing about how I was dressed. And for me, it felt like 10 minutes. I said, "How in God's name did you get back here?" And it had been hours. It had been a couple of hours. And so I do have an actual missing time thing, which happened at Mount Shasta. Now, whether that's related to, the evolved beings that are rumored to live in that area, I don't know whether it was an ET thing, but the fact that my shirt was on backwards is a little bit disturbing, you know. Uh,
Yeah, I've heard
you
of
know.
all kinds of strange phenomenon occurring near around Mount Shasta. Not
Oh
just
yeah.
necessarily, UFO or extraterrestrial, but
Hmm.
all kinds of paranormal. But I also think that lots of paranormal activity, if not all, is somehow connected in
Oh
some
yeah.
ways to ufology. It's really encouraging that a lot of researchers are coming together in these fields because there used to be, well, there still is a lot of infighting, but it seems like there used
Hmm.
to be a lot more infighting between the fields of paranormal and ufology, and it looks like these fields are somewhat starting to collaborate a little bit more, which is
Hmm.
encouraging because I think it's all connected in some way.
I couldn't agree with you more, Chris. And as you know, or you may not know, I work with MUFON rather heavily. I am part of Kathleen Martin's Experiencer Research Program, so they do refer many experiencers to me who might like to undergo some regressive hypnotherapy. But I I completely believe that all of this experience is connected. And even, I mean, this sounds a little far out. You can stop me if it's too far out, but as you can imagine, as a hypnotherapist, I also do past life regressions, interlife regressions, some of these other metaphysical processes. And I can tell you that when we get individuals into these realms of the afterlife, these rarefied realms that are wonderful, where we're all together and thought informs matter, and there are councils that help us to determine our future, people are seeing beings that are not exclusively human. So I believe that in our soul group, if you will, uh, it's not just uh, the Terrans, the earthly humans, that we also are in a soul group with many other, I won't say exactly alike, but similarly constructed beings, the Lyrans, the Pleiadians. These beings seem to be very involved and totally included in our so-called afterlife. And in keeping with that, sometimes in past life regressions, individuals will very easily recall lifetimes spent on other planets. Now, usually it's nothing too far out. I mean, usually it's your basic kind of hominid form, two legs, two arms, head, torso. Um, Anything beyond that may not be that helpful to our human experience. If we enter like into beings that are exclusively aquatic or what, I'm not sure how that impacts on our karmic path, as it were. But definitely, we are in a soul group with a lot of different beings that are cousins, closely related, or not so closely related.
Therapy. Oh, excuse me, my external mic was off there. Sorry about that. When it comes to your hypnotherapy, when did you first starting making the connections that this could help out people who've had, these experiences that they don't
Mm.
understand?
Well, that's such a wonderful question, Chris. Now, I've been practicing hypnotherapy for quite some time. I'm going to say about 15 years. And before that, although I had a parallel career in the entertainment business, I also in the United States am a psychiatric technician too, and I have worked with very mentally ill people. I've worked in a lot of rehabs and such. So I've always, mental health has always been a big part of my raison d'être, my my reason for doing things. And I think that what happened initially is in the practice I first joined after graduating from the hypnotherapy school that I attended. No one wanted to deal with people who felt they were experiencers. And this was a pretty straight ahead clinic, but maybe about once a month, we'd get someone who believed that they had this experience. So the whole thing was just to send those people to me. And somehow that turned in to a really complete focus for my work. Because of course I do work for clinics, but I work on my own, and just through word of mouth, people began seeing me. And I'm kind of the belief system that the people that need to find me. And in the beginning, it probably wasn't that easy to find me, but people did, and that began to expand exponentially. And certainly, with the advent of being able to talk on some wonderful forums and shows like yours, the word has gotten out there that I can, help people with this issue. And then, of course, working through MUFON has been a tremendous learning experience, because those individuals that come through MUFON are properly vetted. You know that anyone that comes to me is not going to be suffering with a mental health issue, that they've already, completed a certain amount of investigation. And my thing is just an addendum to that.
I was actually just going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you how you can tell if someone comes to you and they say, if they've had these contact experiences, they're interested in getting hypnotherapy or regression or something like that. How can you tell before you even do anything if these are genuine experiences or if they may be suffering for some kind of mental
Yeah.
illness?
Well, that also is a wonderful question, Chris. Now, before anybody comes to see me in person or even on Zoom, in the COVID times, I have a very long intake with that person. I talk to them on the phone for a good long time. I have them tell me about their experiences and about their history. And 9 times out of 10, after that, I have a very good idea about what is going on. And certainly not all people who believe they've had ET encounters have had ET encounters. They could have had a dissociative psychotic break. So my whole thing is I have to base my judgment on that intake that I do and the questions that I ask and how they feel and how I feel. Now, if I feel that somebody is really presenting with a real dissociative disorder or mental health issues, I don't just leave them out there to dangle. I have colleagues who are psychotherapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists who I can recommend to these individuals who are open to the idea and therefore will not ridicule these people and will accept them and treat them accordingly. And sometimes people will reveal to me a long, sad mental health history, of hospitalizations and antipsychotic meds, and that's not very common, but I would say about 1 person in 10 who contacts me is really suffering from a dissociative mental health disorder.
Now, have you had cases where maybe it's even a little bit of both? Maybe they do have some mental disorders, but they are also having these experiences. It may be hard, it seems like it'd be extremely hard to tell at times.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that does happen, but I also think that most of the time our ET, friends or Geno relatives, whatever you want to call them, I think that one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, that they are interested in specific people is for telepathic ability. Now, wouldn't it make sense if you were an evolved species who use language only occasionally, that in order to communicate with a species, you would find the members of that species that had the most developed ability or the most innate genetically transferred ability to communicate telepathically? This is, Chris, this is kind of my thinking now, because as I have really spent a lot of time ruminating on this, like, what is the thing? What is attractive? Why are these people having experiences? Because it really cuts across all kinds of lines. I mean, societal lines, socioeconomic lines, racial lines, religious lines, people of all sorts all over the world from and of very different levels of intelligence. I'm not talking about just high IQ'd people, Mensa people here. It's a wide swath. But I think that the commonality is that many of the benevolent ETs have really one message, and that's fix your planet, clean up your mess, get your violence under control, be loving and benevolent, and be ready to join the Association of Civilized Planets. I mean, I think right now we're just a big frustration. If there are civilized beings that are, if there is, and I kind of think there is, a sort of a Gene Roddenberry United Federation of Planets, I think that these evolved beings are probably extremely frustrated with us. I mean, no impulse control. And look at the diversity of people that we have on this planet. I mean, on the low end, we've got like Charles Manson and Donald Trump, and then we've got the Dalai Lama and the various prophets of the ages. I mean, we have a big swath of diversity of the types of beings. And I've heard our life on Earth, I've heard our existence on Earth being described more than once by people in hypnosis, speaking to the beings they interact with. I've heard this described as the grand experiment. And it's a we are there's a lot of interest on us right now. We are a hybrid race. I believe that we are carrying genetic material from uh, Anunnaki, possibly reptilian. We are the hybrids. We are the ETs in a sense. And how we evolve and how we learn to care for each other is everything. I think we are we're going to be we're savages until we learn how to care for each other. Period.
Yeah, one of the messages that seems consistent with contactees that have had positive experiences is what you just said. That we are, they're very special, grand experiment, and we need to take care of, the planet, ourselves, and basically warning us about our own self-destruction, things of that nature. And I want to get more into some of people's experiences and try to
Yes.
understand what occurs. But first, I want to address what happens with people who are taken in their sleep or their
Hmm.
consciousness is taken. It's not a physical experience.
Right,
They
right,
will still
right.
be in their bed. It doesn't look like anything is occurring. I've had a contactee who records herself during these
Hmm.
experiences, and she's just laying there and nothing's happening. But
Yes.
she says that she's being taken on a ship, and all this is occurring. They're doing experiments, and all this is
Hmm.
happening. I'd like to get your take on what is occurring here.
Well, I think we have to sort of open our minds a bit to the nature of reality. I think that we live interdimensional, multidimensional existences. And what seems to happen in all the cases and the research that I've done is after a certain point, an abductee, usually around midlife, really has primarily, as you just expressed, experiences where they sort of bilocate or they leave their physical body and they're operating in a kind of a psychophysical body. This seems to be the preferred way of convening or communicating for many, many species, that we simply don't go in our dense physical bodies, but we project our esoteric body to a specific location. And many of the people that I work with, whether or not they've been involved in the 20 and Back secret space program, and I do have a number of wonderful people with that experience. But whether or not that has happened, the mature experiencers seem to be involved in collaborative work with a variety of extraterrestrial beings. In other words, when they leave their body, they generally go to some type of craft or sometimes a base. There are underground bases, everywhere. So a craft or a base, and they are engaging in some way with both other humans who are also astral projecting, but also a variety of ETs, and they seem to be doing some kind of good work together somehow. Now, also, some of the people that, well, I should say pretty much exclusively the people that I have regressed who are lifelong experiencers, when they're taken as children, it's a much more physical experience. In other words, they're taken out of their beds, they're pulled through the wall. The ETs get them to walk outside. They go through the roof, but it's very, very physical. And somehow the babies or the children are returned before anybody knows anything is happening. Now, there's a great deal of messing about with what we consider linear time. We There is no such thing as linear time. Linear time is an agreement that we have made on this Terran orb so that we can get things accomplished, so that we can mark time. But it actually doesn't really exist. And I believe there's a lot of fiddling about with time that goes on here. But certainly, as you said, in midlife, the vast majority of ET encounters are happening in the etheric body of the experiencer, and they are willing participants who are working in some kind of collaboration with the ETs, either to help our environment or rescue children, or who knows what it is. And the kinds of things that happen to little children when they're taken are like kind of like games. I've heard stories where they're taken into groups with a lot of other little children, some of whom are humanoids, some who aren't, and they're working in various things where with their minds they're constructing shapes, and it all sounds like toys and like play, but it's certainly some type of a
Training.
learning experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, training to develop these these psionic characteristics, PSI.
Yes, I've also interviewed a few people that claim to have been in the secret space program in 20 and back, and they have also claimed to have experienced similar things. These, training environments as young children, being taken and going to these classroom-like environments, things of that nature. So that's very interesting.
Indeed, and I do have a number of individuals that I'm working with who are or have memories of being involved in the 20 and back, the secret space program. And I think the cutting edge, a lot of what we're going to see over these next 5 years, Chris, are a lot of these individuals coming forward, both men and women. And one of the reasons for this is, and this is something that Jason Rice has said, and I've long been in agreement with that. Any kind of memory blocks that were developed by the terrestrial military, shall we say, they only developed them to last for 20 years. So these, dear people who have served not only our country but our world, these dear people who are suffering from some very unique PTSD are now beginning to have memories come back, because there is no memory block that lasts forever. It doesn't exist, whether it's ET installed or whether it's been installed by reverse technology through some machinations of the secret space program. There is no permanent memory block. And many of these dear people who have served so valiantly in 20 and back, they are beginning to recover their memories. Like on the older side, we have Randy Kramer. I'm not sure how you feel about Corey Good, but the younger guy, Jason Rice, is about 10, 15 years younger than Randy Kramer. So we are starting to have people come forward. And I have had, although they haven't come out publicly, I have worked with a number of female experiencers who were also in the 20 and back. So this is not like a male domain. It's just the first people to discuss this have been men.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, especially with what's happening right now with all of the disclosure in the mainstream and the Space Force. And I do want to get your take on that, but I want to go over some of these experiences first. Now,
Okay.
when it comes to people's experiences themselves, especially lately, I'm hearing more and more contactees and experiencers say that in the beginning they were terrified and they thought
Yeah.
they were being killed or these beings were going to hurt them. But the more they find out about these experiences, the more they look back or have a regression done or something like this, it turns into a more positive experience, and they become less afraid of these beings and even kind of welcome it eventually. Is this something that you find is common with contactees?
I think that's incredibly accurate, Chris, of the majority of the experiences that people have. The majority of experiences that people have are positive, most of them. And I have to completely agree. with what you said, and sometimes looking back on things and being able to look at them as they happened through regression instead of just the fragments of stuff that's weird. You're able to get a complete overview, and then realize that whatever happened was more or less a benign experience, like having a COVID test. I mean, and these are the realizations that people generally come to. Now, of course, we're dealing with a lot of different species, Chris, a lot of different species. Um, my my personal opinion about the grays. Now, there are many types of grays, but I think that the little, drone-like grays that are often assisting in procedures, and that, Travis Walton discussed in his experience, I believe that they are not fully biological. I believe that they are more drone-like, and they often are doing the will of their, superiors, who are much more like a Lyran, or a humanoid type being. Most of the time, humanoid type beings, our own ancestors, are really in charge. And I think that the grays are biologically engineered beings, at least the small ones. Now, um, I know that grays were very involved in the Roswell crash, a certain type of gray. In fact, many individuals would date the beginning of the secret space program with the Roswell crash. And I'm sure you probably at least looked at, that amazing book by Philip Corso, The Day After Roswell. Well, the whole our modern era, well, Betty and Barney Hill happened after that, but our modern era of what we are dealing with, or just finished dealing with, begins at Roswell. And apparently, after that crash, beings, and at least two living beings, as well as a lot of technology, was salvaged. And there was apparently some type of deal made during the time that Harry Truman was president. So this is right after the war. FDR's dead, Harry Truman's president, and he was the president that made the deal with these particular ETs that were involved in the Roswell crash. There were three crashes, by the way. We brought them down with some type of primitive electromagnetic weapon that we were developing. We brought them down. Three beings that were just looking around. But these beings made a deal with maybe not just the United States government, but it seems like it. They made a deal and said, okay, well, we'll give you some advanced technology, but in exchange, we're having, fertility problems. We're not able to reproduce, and we would like to harvest some DNA material, healthy DNA, from a very small amount of your Earth citizens. And apparently, this was the agreement. Now, a very small amount, we don't know what that means, but thousands upon thousands of both men for the harvesting of sperm, and both women for the harvesting of ova, or for the incubation of fertilized fetuses. Who knows? This stuff went on like crazy with these particular ETs who had an agreement to do it. Now, this agreement ended about, I think, about 5 years ago, maybe. And so the beings were true to their word. This doesn't happen anymore. It's not happening. This kind of sexually motivated, well, sexually, that's the wrong word, genetically motivated episodes are no longer happening because the agreement has timed out. And so nowadays, it's very unusual for me to regress anyone who is having an experience where either ova or sperm have been extracted. That's very unusual. It has to be an older person who is recalling the experience from their young adulthood right now.
Now, do you have any idea who are these beings behind this? I know you talked a little bit about how the Greys are probably not all biological entities. They may be
Mm-hmm.
some kind of android type um,
Mm-hmm.
engineered little robots that are being
Yeah.
used by more intelligent. You said possibly even our ancestors. I found that interesting because
Mhm.
a few other researchers have talked about aliens being us from the future, which is very
Mhm.
intriguing to me. Now, what do you think is some of the agendas, and who are the beings that are on our side based on what you've learned from different
Mhm.
experiencers?
Well, I think the beings that are on our side really are our cousins, the Pleiadians, the Lyrans, the beings that look so much like us. Even the Anunnaki are considered in that group of Lyrans, and we are really the direct result. If we are to accept the work of Zecharia Sitchin, which I do, we are the direct result of some cloning experiences that occurred between the sophisticated genetic scientists of the Anunnaki and the indigenous hominids that were here at the time, sort of the Neanderthal beings, if you will. So we are, in fact, we have been upgraded. The Adama was the first being that was created, and according to the work of Sitchin, all of this happened when 60,000 years ago, and it was all about the mining of gold in South Africa. So Michael Tellinger is a wonderful source to go to for the history of the Anunnaki and the South American gold mines. He's one of the leading experts in that now. But I believe that these beings, our progenitors, have never um, not cared about what's going on with us. I think they have been watching from afar as we, well, not necessarily always from afar, but they've been watching as we stumble through our nuclear bullshit and our racial bullshit and, our war, all of our shit that we struggle through. And I think that, again, maybe a little bit like the Gene Roddenberry Federation of Planets, I think there's a hands-off policy until we get to a certain point. Like you would tell you, like again in Star Trek, you taught they divide. They have a pre-warp civilizations can't be messed with because they haven't discovered how to travel yet. I think this is where we are. We are, in fact, a kind of a pre-warp civilization. We are the end result of many genetic contributions from many different species. And who's pulling the strings? Who's in charge? That's like the question of questions. I do, as I mentioned before, I do think that there is a kind of a united federation of planets of the evolved species who, but but as far as what goes on our planet goes on in our planet, it's hard not to believe that there isn't some negative influence deeply embedded here.
Now, depending on
It,
who you're talking to, some would say the Anunnaki is pure evil, and the even though they created us, they were just using us for slaves, and that that's a species that can't be trusted. So there's so many different views on who's a bad
mhm,
ET, who's a good ET, and I'm sure
indeed.
there's a lot of misinformation intentionally put out there. So we really don't know, but it is very interesting to think that the more I look at our existence and extraterrestrial phenomenon and abductions and contact experiences and all these things we can't explain, I think sometimes maybe we are just an experiment for these beings, and they just they pop in every while to see how the experiment's going. I don't know.
Well, it kind of feels like that. Now, I have a real trouble with seeing the Anunnaki as intrinsically evil. There's a book that everybody out there should read. It's called The Lost Book of Enki, and it's another work by Zecharia Sitchin, but it gives a real personal view of what Enki, one of the two brothers who was involved here, went through trying to. So you basically had two brothers, one who was very humanitarian and wanted the human beings that had been created as a slave race to evolve and have access to their higher nature. And then you had, his brother, an asshole, and Leal, who would rather have us blown off the face of the earth. So they're within every civilization, you've got your different points of view and what have you. I think it's important to remember that the Anunnaki were people. They were not gods. They were imperfect beings struggling to save their home planet, struggling for power, and they found themselves in a situation which, through the amazing, almost magical properties of physics on our planet, they had abnormally long lives. And so they were godlike, and they passed this longevity to the early, biblical fathers, Methuselah. These were all pretty, even Noah was a son of Enki. So the Bible itself uh, is sort of like, let's see, we say in the States, like a Cliff's Notes version of what
Right.
actually happened.
Yeah.
So many books have been thrown out and edited by so many people with agendas, but the real story is there. And it's a story of greed and jealousy. Even our early biblical stories, that Cain and Abel, these are aspects of ourselves that were also aspects of the Anunnaki. We are them, they are us. As above, so below. I don't think we need any I don't think, I don't like any thoughts about like demons and all of this kind of garbage. I don't think we need any help to be terrible to ourselves. It
Well,
is
I think you're
within.
right about that. I think humans have got a lot of evil covered on their own, and it makes me
Mhm.
wonder when it comes to the evil that's occurring on our planet, all the negativity, all the things that are happening, and the ones at the top. Are they really in cahoots with like off-planet entities, or are they just evil people? That's always the big question for me.
Bad humans. It doesn't take any more than bad
Right.
humans. Greed is the thing. Greed is the thing. Greed, power. And there are those that would argue that these are qualities that were bred into us by the Anunnaki. And I can't really counter that. I think it's very probable, but we are meant to rise above these things. But I don't, when people talk about the queen being reptilian and the Bilderbergs and all, this is all a big smokescreen for the basic fact that we as human beings cannot take responsibility for our own planet, for feeding every hungry baby. And we cannot take responsibility. And this is our challenge. This is our challenge. We must come together for the greater good.
Well, that being said, if it's true that we did make a deal with extraterrestrials for them to harvest genetic material, do you think that there's possibly factions of, I don't want to say our government or a shadow government, whatever you want to call it, that are working with negative ETs for certain nefarious purposes?
I think the most negative ET affiliation that we can probably put our fingers on was the affiliation that Hitler had with a specific group of Greys. And now this is, of course, highly controversial, but Hitler, of course, was way out there. He was open, he had the Vril Society. He was completely open to all of this kind of stuff. And he directed a lot of technology uh, in this kind of vein. And even, oh gosh, what is his name? One of one of the one of the very, very famous astrophysicists, rocket scientists that came over with Project Paperclip to the United States. He was very tall, very, very Teutonic looking, and oh God, my brain. Anyway, I'll think of it at 3 in the morning. Oh, Chris, that's who it was. Anyway, it is. He said, this famous scientist, and I'll probably think of it. He was asked about, Der Glock, like some of these things that went on, and how are these things developed? And he said, we had help from, and gestured upstairs. So there was a certain group of Greys that had the idea that, I guess, regimenting human beings into, like pens, which is what Hitler was doing, was a good idea. And allegedly, there was quite a bit of collaboration there. And also, whether it's true or not, the legend is that Hitler's army are missing something like 27 nuclear subs that just disappeared, and the some some have speculated that they had a chance to get to Antarctica, or New Schwabiland as they were calling it. So anything is possible. But yes, those ETs that were collaborating with Hitler were absolutely negative, and they were grays. And it's just like anything. I'm a New Yorker. People, you got good people, bad people all over this city. It's a diverse group. We have to be careful with who we associate with. And but I do think that there is a benevolent organization that is kind of overseeing what is going on with us now. Now, as far as disclosure, I never saw so much garbage in my life as that 6-page piece of bullshit from the government.
Wasn't it though?
It was
Yeah.
a joke. We've been waiting for the bull. It's a joke. It's a joke. So I think we just need to ignore that. And in fact, many of the people that I regress have been told by their, ET people that they deal with, that disclosure is never going to happen through the government. The way that, maybe in a film, in a cinematic sense, we would like to see it. They tried that. They buzzed the White House. They dealt with some of the benevolent ETs tried to deal with Eisenhower, and were met with a complete shutting down. They said, let us help you with the pollution, with the free energy. And he said, oh, no, 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 everything, our economy will collapse. No. And that was in 19 60, or what have you. So they've tried. I think the benevolent beings have tried. And so now what they're doing is they are coming through channels. There's a lot of that going on. A lot of people are channeling amazing beings, like my friend Daryl Anka, who has been channeling Bashar for God knows how many years. So there's channeling going on, and there are many human beings that are working with the ETs on collaborative projects while they are, allegedly asleep. They're just turned off. They're bilocating. So this is the shape of disclosure. It's not going to come through, what's his name, Elizondo, with his little
Right.
stupid
Well,
little.
there's also kind of being painted as a threat, from the media and the government. But the way I look at it is if they were a threat, they could have eliminated us so many times over throughout
Oh yeah.
history,
Oh yeah.
and it seems like I don't know what they backpedal, and then they put out a little information and they say, oh, it could be a threat, or it could just be
Uh,
swamp gas and birds in the air, so
yeah, it's
it's
swamp gas.
right. So I'm not sure why all of a sudden, in 2017, of course, the New
Huh.
York Times article blew the lid open on the whole UFO thing, and then the mainstream started talking about it. All of a sudden, it was okay to talk about it. Then we had this week report just come out, and they kind of backpedaled a little. So it's very strange, to say the least, what's going on right now, and I always question why the timing. Why right now are they starting to talk about this? Are they trying to get ahead of something? Do they know that there's going to be something occurring that they can't control?
Uh, they know nothing. They're operating in fear. They're marketing in fear, because fear controls people. Fear controls people. If they keep a climate of fear going, like, we don't know what's happening, we don't know, people are destabilized. But in reality, there is absolutely nothing to fear. And as you said so eloquently a few moments ago, if they were hostile, if they wanted to take our resources and blow us off this planet, it would have, by God, happened, a long time ago. This is not what's happening. There are benevolent beings who are trying to lift us up, to help us increase our vibration and move to a new vibrational level. Now, maybe, again, and I know we were talking about this earlier, it's hard to imagine that all of us on Earth, with the wide disparity of intellect and experience, that we could all be sort of raised up to a new vibration at the same time. I'm not sure that can happen. But I think that is the goal. I think that is the goal. And I also think there are a lot of hybrid beings that are living among us. They've been at the hybridization program so long that there are beings that are hybrids that just are so much like us, we would never think to single them out for any reason.
I'm hearing that more and more from different individuals. Some pretty high level individuals that I met lately, telling me that there's hybrids walking among us, which is very interesting to say the least. Now I want to go back for just a minute to people's experiences being abducted or taken on a ship, and then they have foreign objects or implants that they notice in them. Now, what in your experiences, what have been some of the purposes of these implants, and have they been in any danger to people?
Mm, that's a very interesting question. Now, I would say that I don't think any implants have ever been a danger to anyone. I really don't. Um, what I think is happening is, and this is the information that I've been getting from people that I regress, that the implants are kind of like step up transformers in a sense, that wherever they are designed to stimulate or increase psychic ability or intuition or things of that more esoteric nature about us. That's what they're designed to do. And when they're done doing their work, they generally dissolve or they fall out. Like if it's something in somebody's nose, you hear about that all the time, where just they sneeze and a little ball comes out. These are benign. Boy, I wish, Dr. Lear has passed away. He was the foremost expert on implants, and he had removed so many. And he found that some of the implants, as soon as they were exposed to an atmosphere, they dissolved. They just dissolved completely. Some of them kind of ran from him in the body, like if he was trying to take something out of somebody's hand, and it would move and run. So it's there's a big variety of them, but I honestly have never heard of anything negative ever occurring from any implants. And most experiencers report having them. Some experiencers have told me that they have implants or hardware, whatever you want to call it, in their etheric body, but not in their physical body. So perhaps beings that are of a higher dimensional resonance may use implants that simply are in light matter and not in our solid physical matter. So I have not heard anything negative as far as what they do or what they don't do. And the answers that I continue to get from experiencers are that they are to help and assist with our development, and they're not meant to harm in any way.
Is it common when you're working with experiencers that they have the experience of, I guess, being able to go through matter, or being taken and they're going through their ceiling somehow? It's like they can change the structure of their body somehow. Is this something common you've noticed?
It's super common, Chris, and especially when people are taken early in life as children or whatever, as I mentioned. What seems to be happening is many of the ETs are able to simply adjust the vibration of our cells so that they can match that vibration with, say, the vibration of what's going on with a wall or a ceiling, because everything is in motion. All molecules are in motion. When things we perceive that as hard are just moving very slowly, but even glass is a liquid, technically. So I think that many of the beings can simply adjust our level of vibration so that the cells, our cells, can pass through similar cells that they adjust, like through a solid object. It seems to be an adjustment, and that's
And
it.
along the same lines, these beings seem to be able to be around us at all times and just not in our visible spectrum. I've
Hmm.
talked with a couple of contactees who said that they've had interactions with these beings who said that they can see them. They just they can't see us, but they can
Hmm.
adjust our vision to where we can see them somehow. It's
Hmm.
very interesting.
I That's absolutely true. This is exactly what I'm hearing, and which is now the only difference that people seem to experience if there's an ET presence that is not manifesting fully physically, as opposed to a discarnate spirit, like a humanoid spirit that doesn't know they're dead or is like hanging out and hasn't moved on. The spirit energy of the discarnate spirit will create cold spots because they're trying to grab energy and manifest. I have found that when beings who are extraterrestrial but are not fully physicalized are trying to manifest, it's an atmosphere of warmth. It's warm energy. It has a completely different feeling than anything that you would call spooky or ghost like, right? So but yes, they are existing in a different vibratory spectrum, so that we can't necessarily see them, but they can make it so that we do see them. But it takes a lot of effort for some beings, and some beings are completely physical in the way that we are. They just have better tech.
Now, it's the past few years. You mentioned, people kind of awakening. I've noticed a shift in consciousness. It seems to be wobbly. It seems to be up and
Mhm.
down. But
Mhm.
I think that more people are becoming more open-minded now with all the stuff in the mainstream with the ET stuff. I think more
Mhm.
people might feel more comfortable talking about their experiences, talking about things they've seen. They're letting the Navy pilots report this stuff. Have you
Yep.
found that more people, since this whole UFO stuff has been in the mainstream, have been talking about this to you?
Oh, absolutely. And even, the amount of people that come to me, it accelerates all the time. And I mean, just look at the media. You're a young whippersnapper, but a few years ago there was hardly any programming on the major networks that dealt with this type of subject matter. Certainly nothing as in depth as all the wonderful programming that we have, not only alternative programming and podcasting and such like yourselves, but even the major networks are forced to have, all kinds of programming, the Alaska Triangle, the this, the that. So I think I think we are really this on the crest we're on the crest of huge disclosure and huge progress. We really, really are. But I think if we're looking for, like a benevolent superhero, going to happen. I
Right.
think I think we have to be responsible for our own evolution. We really do. And it's all within our power. It's all within our power. Right now, we can change anything. We just have to agree upon it and do it.
Yes, very well said. I agree. It's going to be up to us to make those changes. Leslie, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Before you head out, if anyone in our audience has an experience that they'd be interested in possibly talking to you about, finding out more information about you, your books, what's the best way for them to do so?
Well, my mobile phone is always on. You can always text me or ring me at 416 454 8041. even if you just want to chat, if you just need some support, some information, please call me. And you can always email me at Lesley, Lesley, at Lightwork Hypnosis. That's all one word, lightworkhypnosis.com. So text me, ring me, email me. I am happy to hear. I'm happy to hear from anyone, even if you just want support, if you're not ready to explore it with any process, I don't care. I'm here as a support system, and I have many colleagues that are also right by my side as support systems. It's not just me. There's a whole whack of us ready to help people in any way that we can.
Awesome. Lesley, thank you so much. I have a whole list of stuff that we didn't get to tonight, so I'm going to have you back on so we can cover some more. Yeah.
You better believe it, Chris. Anytime you like, I'd be so happy to chat with you. That's right. We just sort of skimmed the surface,
right,
but
yeah.
I would love to come back and visit you anytime.
Definitely. We'll schedule something. And thank you so much again for coming on.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Chris. You take care. Bless you. Okay. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening.